But while united in their grief, the Newtown families are not unanimous when it comes to the push for new gun control laws. Mark Mattioli, whose son James would have turned 7 last month, believes more gun laws are not the answer, and he says the focus needs to be on something else. Mark Mattioli is here with me now live in the studio. Mark, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
In watching those families last night on 60 Minutes, it was incredible to see their strength and their ability to even just function in this world 4 months after their children were so suddenly and terribly killed. Let's just start with that. How are you managing to function in this world right now?
Well, I'm broken, devastated, drowning in grief. But even though each week that goes by is becoming not necessarily easier, I am compelled to participate in this debate because I'm not hearing a voice that's really agreeing with me. I believe there are tens of millions of people out there who agree that gun control isn't necessarily the solution, but perhaps it's a way to avoid some of the sadness to participate in the debate. I don't know.
And you are right, because so many of the Newtown families have joined in the push for gun control, and certainly you respect them and their opinions and their beliefs about what needs to happen out of this tragedy. But you do feel very differently. Why do you feel that gun control and the push for any one of these bills we're seeing right now is not the way to go?
Well, you know, perhaps you've heard the term before, but I feel it's a false premise. Gun control works for people who abide by the laws. Criminals who conduct most of the gun crime don't care about the law. They won't look up the Connecticut law to see how many guns, how many bullets have to be in the magazine that they're supposed to register with the state police at some point in the future once they come up with a blueprint for how to administer that.
And yet, some of the parents made the point to 60 Minutes that still they could be slowed down. The law could slow future killers down by limiting the magazine clips available to them, and perhaps that could have made a difference in Newtown, talking about you know, how he had to reload and how 11 kids managed to escape the classroom when the killer there reloaded, and why wouldn't we limit magazines on the federal level in the wake of that knowledge?
Right, so again, false premise in that they're not talking about confiscating those magazines. The magazines are out there. If we were starting at point A and there were no guns and no magazines, fine, perhaps we could talk about that. But there are millions, tens of millions of these out there, and criminals aren't going to hand them back. So why should I be hampered in protecting myself when someone could come to my home and outgun me? Should I feel safer because New York criminals will only be loading 7 bullets in their 15-round magazine? I don't think so.
What do you believe these lawmakers need to be focused on?
Well, you know, the lawmakers, they write laws, and, you know, if you're a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. That's what they do. I didn't have much optimism about what they were going to bring through after what they did with the Cheshire home invasion. All they did was repeal the death penalty. There's no accountability for your actions. I believe accountability, enforcement of existing laws. I talked to the U.S. Attorney, David Fine for Connecticut, and he, you know, I said, increase mandatory minimum sentences on gun-related crime. That does it. You don't need a new law. You need to enforce the laws that you have.
I know you've spoken, among other topics, about parental responsibility and how important that is. And I want to ask you specifically, is that a reference to Nancy Lanza? And do you hold her responsible, accountable in any way for this crime?
You know, it's been 4 months, and for most of that time I've been quite charitable toward her. I didn't give the how, the why, and the how much. You know, we all knew the who, what, when, and where. But yes, it is. I do hold her accountable. A massive failure in parenting, and things could have gone so much better if she had been a responsible parent. I think, in light of this tragedy, there's so much that can be shared about parenting. I'm learning more, and I think that should be spread across the country. Just focus on your kids. There's no more important job, nurturing, loving, being present and positive force in their lives.
And the mental health system. which you feel has been all but ignored in the wake of Newtown.
Right, there's so much that they're missing the boat here, and I fear that the political forces are focusing on gun control when major failing in mental health initiatives. So in Connecticut, the governor's talking about we need mental health, they're proposing this task force, and yet he's slashing the budget to hospitals by $550 million. So they're the ones who treat mental illness, they diagnose it, they treat it. How are they supposed to do that when these dollars are taken out of their system? It makes no sense.
Many of the Newtown families seem to suggest that they will be heard, and seem to be implying that if this doesn't get done at the federal level, it will be an affront to the Newtown families, and they will continue to push for it. I mean, if you could speak to these lawmakers directly who are going to look at this federal bill this week, what would you say?
Two things, really. One would be, given this situation, have a seat at the table. I've been in the room, and they are approaching this in a very incremental way. They will take what they can get and take and take and take. And so I would caution legislators, be wary of that. Second, I feel like in Connecticut, when you watch the hearings, the legislative session, this groupthink is taking place. They're suspending reason and critical analysis when those are what we need of these legislators to make reasoned decisions about the Second Amendment and other things that affect our liberties here. It's unbelievable.
It's very